Hey guys, welcome. It's a special Thursday morning LSAT class. This is a sample class of the regular class that I teach every Tuesday and Thursday night in the LSAT Demon. I have a couple helpers here. You'll see Maddie and Abigail from LSAT Demon. They're here to help me monitor the chat and answer whatever questions you guys have might have in the background. You're welcome to ask any question at any time. We have a public chat that's wide open for you guys to say hi and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, including asking questions. You also can use the raise hand feature if you want to get in line to ask a question out loud, or right now nobody's really saying anything. So if you want to just shout it out, please feel free to go ahead and ask me a question. Anybody want to kick it off? It's an all levels class, by the way. We're going to do a little bit of logical reasoning, a little bit of logic games, a little bit of reading comprehension. I like to kind of mix it up and keep it moving. A lot of you are unfamiliar faces from our free program. Welcome. Many of you are continuing students from one of our paid programs. Actually, could we do one thing real quick? By the way, turn your cameras on, please. If I can see your faces, it makes me a much better teacher. And if I think it makes you a better student too, because less possibility of just spacing out or slacking off. Thank you. I can see you. Hi, welcome. Happy Thursday. So if I could do one thing real quick before I get to Katie's question, could I get a thumbs up from people who are continuing students in Demon Live or in one of our other programs, just so that everybody knows who's knows about the program, so you guys can help each other out too. Thank you very much. So for those of you who are just checking it out, if you want to talk to any of those folks, they know how the whole thing works, and they'll give you maybe a less biased opinion about LSAT Demon than Maddie or Abigail will. Cool. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, Maddie and Abigail can answer questions in the chat. I'm going to answer Katie's question because you've got a hand up. What can I do for you, Katie?
Is it too late to submit questions for the Black Diamond tonight?
You can try. Double Black Diamond is a thing that I've been doing on Thursday nights lately. It's our first expert level class inside LSAT Demon Live. What we do is we accumulate all the hardest logical reasoning questions and logic games that we have encountered in our classes or private tutoring sessions or self-study throughout the week. And then I run through them kind of at real speed. So you can see what it looks like, the expert level approach on the very hardest questions. The way you submit those questions, Katie, is you just email Brittany@lsatdemon.com. Might not be too late to get it on the agenda. I know she's working today, so maybe you can catch her. Cool. Maybe one or two more questions before we dive into today's syllabus. Amelia, hi.
Hey there. Okay, I had a quick question about reading comps. So
Sure.
In your reading comp lesson, one of the notes you are just the Demon makes is most test takers won't make it to all 4 passages. Yep. Or you should just try to do 3 perfectly really well. So I guess my question is, what if I'm at a point right now, baby steps, where I'm getting to 3 passages and I have 4 or 5 minutes left? I guess my question is should I even attempt to go to that 4th passage, or should I go back and make sure that I'm 100% set on the questions that I answered for the 3 I did, and then just kind of I guess for lack of a better word, guess on the last few questions. What episode is that? Thank you, Mallory, but I didn't hear this one yet, so.
Sure. I can't really answer the question with certainty because everybody has a balance between accuracy and speed, but I will go ahead and guess. I mean, for 99.9% of students, you guys focus too much on speed and not enough on accuracy. So you got to look at your results, and your results aren't going to lie. If you're missing more than 2 or 3 questions in the first 3 passages, then you probably shouldn't have done the fourth passage, because you did sloppy work. You didn't get paid for those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 questions that you missed. I mean, sometimes we see people like, yeah, I did 3 passages and I tried to do the fourth. And then it's like, but on the 3 passages that they did, they missed 7 questions. Okay. In that case, you're missing a full passage worth of questions. So it's obvious that you should not be trying to do that fourth passage. I'm not even sure you should have done the third passage, because you have to get the questions right, or else it's as if you didn't even do them anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So if you, I guess I honestly have to do some of my own experimental work and
Yes.
see what works best for me. So like, I'll probably try to do a few more time sections, because I'm in like the 1 to 3 on the first 3. So like, I'll have to just see if it's like better to go back. Like, and
Yeah,
just, like,
you're close. I mean, if you get to the point where you're missing 1 or 2 questions in the first 3 passages, then it's like, well, okay, you know, even an expert might drop 1 question. 2 questions, I don't know. 3 questions is like getting sloppy. Yeah, we just can't do sloppy work. We have to get paid for the work that we're going to actually do. Looks like we have a podcast discussion for you and a timestamp and everything. Thank you, Katie. All right. Thank you, Amelia. Any other questions before we move on? Beautiful. Our agendas for my classes are always posted way in advance on lsatdemon.com. All you do is log in, look at classes. You should see the agenda for today's class. Everybody got that? If not, Maddie and Abigail can help you find it. Looks like we're going to start with a hard logic game today, this game about bouquets. Then we're going to do 3 logical reasoning questions, and we're going to end with a reading comprehension question. If you're an accommodated student or you just want extra time for whatever reason, you can always log on and do these questions in advance. If you can't make class for whatever reason, we record all these classes, and with a subscription to the Demon, you have access to all of these. You can do the class overnight. You can do the class the next day. You can do the classes whenever. As a matter of fact, if you're a live subscriber, you can go back and do the entire last year plus worth of my classes. I think you probably could just do class with me every single day if that's what you wanted to do. You could also do classes with any of our other wonderful teachers if you prefer their style. All right, let's get on with it, I suppose. I know that this game is pretty challenging. There's a couple reasons why I know that it's challenging. I've obviously done it before, but it's also a game for. If you're just starting out, this logic game is going to be harder than average, so don't panic if it seems super challenging. The one thing that every logic game ever has in common, though, is that they always give you all of the information you need in order to perfectly answer every single question. Like if I, you were locked in a jail cell and all you had for entertainment was this logic game, it wouldn't, you'd have solved it within a couple hours. I mean, you'd figure it out. Even if you've never seen a logic game before, you would figure this out if you had unlimited time. So don't race to the finish here. Let me give you a little bit of a tip about how I'm going to set this one up. For almost every logic game, like 99% of all logic games, you're probably going to need to put the pencil on the paper and make a little bit of a diagram. Just draw a picture to solve it. Here we have bouquet 1, 2, and 3, and they're each going to have some flowers in them. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3, and then I'm gonna build lists going down of what kind of flowers are in each bouquet. 1 and 3 can't have any kind of flower in common. I might do something like this. I'm gonna put it, sorry, I'm at the very top of my whiteboard, but this means I cannot have 1 and 3, nothing in common between those 2 groups. 2 and 3 have to have exactly 2 types in common, which I might, and I keep saying I might, and that's because I don't know exactly how I'm going to solve this game. This game does not fit comfortably into any type. It's not like I have any kind of preordained formula that I'm applying here. I approach the games in a very improvisational way. And the thing is, you just got to practice tons and tons and tons of logic games so that you don't get intimidated by something like this. I might do these rules this way. Bouquet 2 and 3 have 2 types in common. So, okay, so I put 2 spaces under 2 and 3, and then I put the double arrow indicating, hey, these have to match. Now, that's not the only way to deal with that rule, but it's one way. Bouquet 3 has to have snapdragons, and that puts me in a little bit of a, I guess I have to make a decision here about how I'm going to approach this game. One way to do it would be to decide in advance that I'm going to make 2 worlds, a world where Bouquet 2 does have snapdragons and a world where Bouquet 2 does not have snapdragons. If Bouquet 2 does have snapdragons, then that's one of the 2 types of flowers that Bouquet 2 and 3 have in common. If Bouquet 2 does not have snapdragons, then Bouquet 3 will have to have a 3rd type of flower that it does not share with Bouquet 2. And I don't know, let me see what other rules we've got. We've got a rule that says if any bouquet has lilies, then it also has to have roses, but can't have, snapdragons. There's snapdragons again. I think I can learn right away from that rule that Bouquet 3 can't have lilies. Now, that's a baby step. It's not nearly as complicated as you think. They just told us that Bouquet 3 must have snapdragons. And then that 4th rule says, well, if you have lilies, you can't have snapdragons. Okay, then Bouquet 3 can't have lilies, right? That's a baby step. That's a thing that is true about this game that you learn by connecting the rules together. And that's really the key to these logic games, is that you just figure shit out. You just take baby steps when they are offered to you. Last rule says if you have tulips, you have to have peonies. Yeah, I don't know. I always default on this game. I just tend to default to an approach. I'm going to see if I can squeeze it in right here so that I can save board space for later. Bouquet 3 has to have snapdragons. And so this is going to be 2 worlds based on that rule about Bouquet 3 having snapdragons. I want to incorporate that rule. I also want to be sensitive to the rule that Bouquet 2 and 3 have to have exactly 2 types in common. So here's what I'm thinking. If Bouquet 2 does have snapdragons, then that's one of the 2 types in common between Bouquet 2 and Bouquet 3. If Bouquet 2 does not have snapdragons, then that means it doesn't have snapdragons in common with Bouquet 3, which then means that Bouquet 3 must have a 3rd flower, snapdragons. Could have a 4th flower or 5th, I don't know, but if Bouquet 2 doesn't have snapdragons, then I know that Bouquet 3 has at least 3 types of flowers. It is totally okay if your head is spinning and you just don't follow anything that I just did. This class has started off with a very difficult logic game. Okay, this is like 9 or 10 out of 10 difficulty logic game. So don't panic, just hang in there. We're going to get to easier stuff later, I promise. From here, 2 worlds based on snapdragons in Bouquet 2. Again, it's a world where Bouquet 2 does have snapdragons and a world where Bouquet 2 does not have snapdragons. I guess I can add in this realization that Bouquet 3 never has lilies. That's because snapdragons are there. In this world, neither Bouquet 2 nor Bouquet 3 has lilies. Let me ask you this. Does that mean that Bouquet 1 has to have lilies?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I see a lot of heads shaking. If you're not sure, you have to reread the rules. Was there a rule that said every type of flower has to be used at least once? No. Okay, that's important because in some games they would say all 5 types of flowers have to be used in at least one of the bouquets. This game doesn't have that rule, which means I cannot here give lilies to bouquet 1. Okay, let me let you guys work on it for just a couple minutes. I know that this one is really hard. I'll give you like 3-4 minutes to kind of play with it, and then I'll come back and I'll do a full explanation for this game. Thanks for being here. Good luck. All right, let me move forward here. Most students are going to dive into question number 19 a little bit before they really should. And then at some point in question 20, 21, 22, they're going to get stuck. And that's because they haven't quite learned enough about the way the game works. Let me record a full video explanation. We have video and written explanations for every game and every question in the DMin. And we continue to, I mean, for the very few that we don't, we continue to create that content. So there's eventually, very soon, we're going to have full coverage. We have multiple videos for every logic game, but we also continue to refresh that content and make it as good as we possibly can. So I'm going to record a full video explanation for this game, and it'll live on in the DMin forever. Test 73, the fourth logic game. I'm going to use two worlds to solve what turns out to be a pretty difficult game 4. I think the reason why it's difficult is because there's no maximum or minimum really number of flowers that must be used in each of the 3 bouquets. This game seems to have quite a bit of flexibility. I'm hoping that my two worlds here is going to limit some of that flexibility and then let us play an easier game from there. The decision that I made up front is to make 2 worlds, a world where Bouquet 2 does have snapdragons and a world where Bouquet 2 does not have snapdragons. That was my first, if I think about this as surgery, that's my first incision here is like, hey, we got to open this up. A world where we do have snapdragons in Bouquet 2 and a world where we don't have snapdragons in Bouquet 2. The reason why I chose snapdragons in Bouquet 2 to build my worlds off of is that I know that Bouquet 3 has to have snapdragons. And I know that Bouquet 2 and 3 have to have exactly 2 types of flowers in common. So in the world where Bouquet 2 has snapdragons, then that's one of the exactly 2 types of flowers that it has in common with Bouquet 3. In the world where Bouquet 2 does not have snapdragons, Bouquet 3 still has to have snapdragons, but it's not one of the 2 types of flowers that it has in common with Bouquet 2, which means in that world, Bouquet 3 has to have at least 3 types of flowers. And that's just one little baby step. All I'm trying to do is make as many baby steps as possible to learn as much as I can about the game. There are 2 baby steps that I've made here in both worlds. Bouquet 3 can never have lilies because we have a rule that says if you have lilies, you have to have roses and can't have snapdragons. So since we have snapdragons here, we can't have lilies. Same thing in this world. Also in this world, Bouquet 2 can't have lilies. Once you have snapdragons, you can't have lilies. And then this baby step, that Bouquet 1 can never have snapdragons. That's because of the rule that says Bouquet 1 and Bouquet 3 can't have anything in common. Okay, so I've made a bunch of baby steps so far. What I'm really looking for is bottlenecks and just kind of tricky spots in the game. I just want to make a couple more baby steps here before I get sucked into the questions. The idea is that I'm going to learn as much as I can about the system up front, and then that's going to pay off on question 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. If I don't learn about the system up front, then that means that I'm going to basically have to reinvent the wheel on every single question. And I really don't want to do that. So I guess I might start by, in this world, think about Bouquet 3 here. There's only 5 types of flowers total to choose from, right? We've got L, P, R, S, T. All right, but in this world, Bouquet 3 does not have lilies. I mean, it just never has lilies. It also has snapdragons not in common with Bouquet 2. So we're in a situation now where the only thing we have left for Bouquet 2 is, and it has to have at least 2 more types of flowers. We've got T, P, and R. Okay, T, P, and R. The last rule says if you have T, you must have P. Well, let's think about this for a second. How do I pick 2 out of the 3 of T, P, and R? I must have 2 out of these 3. But if I have T, I have to have P. Well, what that means is if I don't have P, the game is going to break. If I don't have P, then I can't have T, right? Anytime I have T, I have to have P. So to pick 2 out of these 3, the only way to do that is to have P for sure with either T or R. And yes, Maddie, I could have all 3 potentially, but I must have at a minimum 2 out of these 3 because I have to have 2 in common with Bouquet 2. And so I make the inference here, or sorry, I shouldn't say inference because that sounds magical, mystical. It's not. I make the baby step here. I make the realization here that Bouquet 3 has to have P in common with Bouquet 2. And then the other flower in that bouquet is going to be T or R. And then, yeah, we might have other flowers as well. Now I'm going to get greedy, okay? I'm going to get greedy here because it's like playing solitaire, you know, the old person game with playing cards, where you go through the deck, and then if you make one move, you get to go through the deck again and potentially make other moves. And sometimes there's this big cascade of moves that happen once you just make one single move. That's how these logic games work. If I have P here, then I cannot have P in Bouquet 1. So Bouquet 1 now starts to get limited. By the way, look at that last rule. If you have T, you have to have P. So that means if you don't have P, you can't have T. And now all of a sudden in Bouquet 1, which still does, by the way, need at least 1 flower, Bouquet 1, the only flowers that are available now for Bouquet 1 are L and R. Oh, interesting. Interesting. The only flowers available for Bouquet 1 in this world are L and R. If I have L, I have to have R. That's part of what that 4th rule says. If I have L, I have to have R. So in this world, I definitely have R for sure. Once I definitely have R for sure in this bouquet, then this can no longer be R, because Bouquet 1 and Bouquet 3 can't have anything in common, which now means that Bouquet 3 is exactly P, T, and S. That's the only flowers that are even available for Bouquet 3, which now means Bouquet 2 must have T in order to have 2 things in common with Bouquet 3. Can Bouquet 1 still have lilies? Sure. If you have lilies, you have to have roses and can't have snapdragons. I know that Bouquet 3 doesn't have lilies. So lilies is going to become a wild card, which sometimes I might do by circling it as like, maybe it's there, maybe it's not. In this world, I'm almost done actually in this world, because here I know for sure that Bouquet 3 has P, T, S, not L, not R. I know that Bouquet 1 has for sure R, not S, P, or T, maybe L. Bouquet 2, let's see. The only thing that's left is lilies and roses. I think it could go ahead and have lilies. If it does, it has to have roses. It could also just have roses, but not lilies, or maybe it has neither of them. So I think Bouquet 2 here is like maybe lilies, maybe roses. And I'm very happy actually with this approach now, because this is a very hard game, but I made a simple split at the beginning. Does Bouquet 2 have roses? Sorry, snapdragons? or does Bouquet 2 not have snapdragons? And as it turns out, in the world where Bouquet 2 doesn't have snapdragons, I know exactly what's in Bouquet 3. I know almost exactly what's in Bouquet 1. I know almost exactly what's in Bouquet 2. And I have very simple rules to play with here. You know, the only rule that's really still alive is if you have lilies, you have to have roses in Bouquet 2. And I hope you see what I'm getting at here, which is I get to incorporate rules into my setup so that I don't have to continue to process all those rules anymore. Over here, I've got quite a bit more flexibility, I think. So now I have a bit of a decision to make, okay? I could dive into the questions, or I could try to split this world to eliminate another rule to get myself to, you know, even more certainty, right? So, you know, I'm tempted to do it with like, does Bouquet 1 have lilies or not? The reason why I would choose does Bouquet 1 have lilies or not is that that rule is the most complex rule in the game. If you have lilies, you have to have roses, but can't have snapdragons. And what's going to happen in that world is if Bouquet 1 has lilies, I'm going to probably know like everything in the game. I would think that it's going to trigger a lot of stuff because it'll put lilies and roses in Bouquet 1, which means this can't be roses, which then means it has to be tulips or peonies. And if it's tulips, you have to have peonies, which means it has to be peonies and can't be tulips. Okay, I convinced myself that I want to do it. So I'm going to split this world. The first step here is just to replicate everything. Okay, and the split I'm going to do here is Bouquet 1 might have lilies or might not have lilies. In the world where it doesn't have lilies, then nobody has lilies, then I get to forget about that rule entirely. Just lilies are not even on the table. In the world where it does have lilies, then I apply the rule. If you have lilies, you have to also have roses, which immediately means Bouquet 3 can't have roses. And now that rule is eliminated. And I hope I'm illustrating here the point of the purpose of making worlds is to eliminate rules. The purpose of splitting worlds is to eliminate rules. With this split, the second split that I made, I get to eliminate that rule about lilies entirely. I have a world where it applies and I have applied it. I have a world where it doesn't apply, so I get to forget about it. So that rule is dead to me now. And the thing that I foresaw is that in Bouquet 3, again, look what's happening here. Bouquet 3 has lilies, doesn't have lilies, doesn't have roses, does have snapdragons, must have either tulips or peonies. But if it has tulips, it has to have peonies. And Bouquet 3, I gotta be careful now. I don't want to make a step extra, but what I'm thinking is Bouquet 2 and Bouquet 3. Well, maybe, yeah, for sure. So what's going to happen here is that Bouquet 2 actually can't have tulips. If it did, then it would have tulips and peonies. Well, wait a second. It could have tulips, but it does have to have peonies. It can't have tulips and peonies in common with Bouquet 3, because then you'd have 3 things in common. Okay, so I know for sure that Bouquet 3 does have peonies, and that means it's going to have peonies in common with Bouquet 2. Okay, so then tulips actually becomes, you could have tulips in one or the other, but not both. You could also still have roses here. Okay, so tulips is available, but not in both. Roses is available here. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little messy now and kind of running out of running out of board space. Over here, the only thing that's available still is tulips and peonies. That's going to happen a lot where tulips and peonies are kind of like, yeah, maybe. Oh, wait, sorry, my bad. Because peonies are here, peonies and tulips are now off the table. So bouquet 1 is exactly lilies and roses. Down here, man, I'm see now I really want to get greedy and just like totally solve the game. Somebody asks, couldn't tulips still go in 1? No, because if tulips go here, then peonies have to go here, and peonies are already in bouquet 3, so peonies can't go in bouquet 1, which means tulips also can't go in bouquet 1. Thank you for your question. Man, in this world, boy, if I don't have lilies and I don't have snapdragons, then I've got tulips, peonies, or roses. Yeah, but there's still some flexibility there. All right. So here, I would just leave this as like, there are other solutions available in this world. But this and this are really pretty sorted out. I mean, there's very little flexibility here. Bouquet 1 has no flexibility. Bouquet 2 has a tiny bit. Bouquet 3 has a tiny bit. In this world, bouquet 1 has a tiny bit of flexibility and bouquet 2 has a tiny bit of flexibility. But otherwise, there's lots of stuff that's known. And then all other solutions, it's going to kick me down into this world. Now, I know a lot of you are sitting there like, Jesus Christ, Nathan, you can't possibly take that much time to do your setup. But I can, because what's going to happen is when I turn to these questions, many of them are going to be just trivial. And there are a lot of logic games, especially the ones that seem to be super hard. There's a lot of games where I might spend 6-7 minutes on my setup and then spend literally 45 questions running through all of the questions. Sorry, 45 seconds running through all of the questions. Amanda asks how long this setup would take me in real time. Probably, I don't know, yeah, 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes. Probably not longer than that. It takes a lot longer to, explain it and do it on a whiteboard than it does if I was just doing it with unlimited scratch paper in front of me and not having to explain what I'm doing. Okay, let's look at number 19. This is a list question. We can always do this type of question by process of elimination. Wait, sorry, before I get to that, Amelia.
I just had a quick question. Why, I know you want to leave that last world open, but why not just throw R in there? Because that's the only option left from for the last world that you're leaving kind of open
here.
Yeah, that spot where it has the arrows has to go in both. Isn't the
here?
Only option left R? Because if you put T, that won't work in that spot.
No, but it could be P.
But we did that on the world before.
Yeah, but I don't care.
Okay.
I don't care. You've got to be clear about what the split was in the first place. You don't, just because things happened here doesn't mean they can't also happen here.
Okay, so the split was if we have L, where do we split it then?
Yeah, it was here. The split was we either do or don't have lilies. Gotcha. And then we follow the baby steps from there. But just because something does happen here doesn't mean it can't happen here.
All right, sorry. I think I was looking at my worlds from before and I got mixed up. All right.
No problem. No, that's a great question. Thank you. Okay, number 19, we can probably always just do by process of elimination. Bouquet 1 and 3 can't have anything in common. So let's see. A, bouquet 1 has lilies and roses. Bouquet 3 doesn't have any of those. So that's fine according to that first rule. B, peonies and roses in bouquet 1, but also peonies in bouquet 3. Nope, B is out. C, peonies and tulips in bouquet 1, R and S in bouquet 3, that's fine. D, bouquet 1 has R, which is not in bouquet 3, that's fine. E has S in bouquet 1 and not in bouquet 3, so that's fine. B is eliminated. Next rule. Bouquet 2 and bouquet 3 must have exactly 2 kinds of flowers in common. So looking at A, I see P and T in common between bouquet 2 and bouquet 3, that's fine. C has R and S in common, that's fine. D has P and S in common. That's fine. E has L and R in common. That's fine. I think the second rule doesn't eliminate anything on this particular question. Third rule, which some of you might have chosen to test first because it's a very simple rule. Bouquet 3 has snapdragons. I just scanned through the answer choices. Okay, that eliminates E. Then we have these two conditional rules. If you have lilies, you have to have roses, no snapdragons. So I'm looking for lilies. If you have lilies, A, bouquet 1 has lilies. It has to have roses, which it does. It can't have snapdragons, which it doesn't. Looks like A is fine according to that fourth rule. C, looking for lilies. Nothing has lilies, so the rule has no impact. Looking at D, bouquet 3 does have lilies, which means it must have roses, which it doesn't. It also means it can't have snapdragons, which it does. So D is double eliminated by that fourth rule. Last rule, if you have tulips, you have to have peonies. I'm just scanning, looking for tulips without peonies. I see that C, bouquet 2 has tulips without peonies. That eliminates C. I've tested all the rules. I've eliminated B, C, D, and E. 100% sure now that the answer for number 19 is A. All right. Number 20 says, if lilies are in bouquet 1, which one of the following must be true? And I have a feeling that my worlds are going to connect pretty well with this question, okay? Normally on an if question, if I hadn't made strong worlds, for an if question, I would have to make a new setup where bouquet 1 has lilies. But if I have worlds, I'm going to look for places where bouquet 1 does have lilies and places where bouquet 1 does not have lilies. It is possible in this world for bouquet 1 to have lilies. It is not possible here. Oh, and here bouquet 1 does have lilies. Okay, so I'm looking for something that must be true when bouquet 1 has lilies. And I spot right away that in both of these templates, bouquet 2 and 3 have peonies. Turns out that's not the answer. Okay, let me see. Something that has to be true in both of these templates. Lilies are in bouquet 2. No, that actually has to be false here. Could be true here. Definitely doesn't have to be true. Peonies are in bouquet. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I missed it, but yeah, that's the answer. And that's going to happen a lot. When you make really strong worlds, when you get really good at the logic games, you're going to actually just predict the answer to many of the questions. It is not possible down here for bouquet 3 to have lilies. Sorry, bouquet 1 to have lilies. For bouquet 1 to have lilies, I have to be in this world or this world. And in both of those templates, bouquet 3 has peonies, and that's the answer. Number 20 is B. 21 says, what happens when tulips are in bouquet 1? That's not in this world. It's not in this world. It is in this world. Okay, so for tulips to be in bouquet 1, I might be able to already answer this question. You know, the answer could be something like this, or I don't know. Let's see. Which one of the following could be a complete and accurate list of the kinds of flowers in bouquet 2? Well, it has to have snapdragons, which gets rid of A and D. It can't have lilies. That doesn't do anything. Yeah, I'm actually going to probably have to do a new diagram here for number 21. So I'm going to make a version of this. In fact, because I have two different colors of whiteboard marker, I'm just going to do it right here. If bouquet 1 has tulips, well, then it has to have peonies as well. Oh, this is going to probably be an easy question. If I have tulips and peonies here, then I can't have tulips or peonies here, which means I have to have roses here, which means I have to have roses here. And that's probably just going to be the answer. Bouquet 2 has to have roses, which gets rid of B and C. I think it is still possible for bouquet 2 to have peonies and tulips. Cannot have lilies, must have snapdragons, and roses, and that snapdragons roses combination is enough to make 21E. All right, number 22. Which one of the following cannot be a complete and accurate list of the kinds of flowers in bouquet 2? So something that will never work as a combination for bouquet 2. I don't know. Would it be possible for bouquet 2 to have lilies and roses? Lilies and roses, and that's it? No, that's not possible. And I can just look at that from my worlds. Okay, so this is another example of where my worlds just make this game into a piece of cake. I mean, the answer here is going to be A, because you can't ever have just lilies and roses in bouquet 2. In this world, it has tulips and peonies. In this world, it has snapdragons and peonies. And in this world, it can't have lilies at all and must have snapdragons. So bouquet 2 is never going to have just lilies and roses, and that's the answer. If we weren't 100% sure, we could certainly double check here. Can it have just peonies and tulips? Seems like it works in that template. How about just peonies, roses, and snapdragons? Seems like it works here. How about just peonies, roses, and tulips? I think that also would work. Oh, wait, sorry. Peonies, roses, and tulips. Oh, here. Peonies, tulips, roses. Yep, that would work. How about just PRST? Seems like it would work here. Okay, so I knew that A wouldn't work. And then I double check quickly and I see that B, C, D, E will work. Now I'm like 200% sure that the answer for number 22 is A. Last question, which one of the following cannot be true? A says lilies and roses are the only kinds of flowers in bouquet 1. That could definitely be true in that template, maybe here as well. How about just peonies and tulips in bouquet 1? Seems like it would work here. I don't see any reason why. Well, wait a second. Peonies to, oh, wait a second. That's the answer. The reason why it's not okay for peonies and tulips to be the only kinds of flowers in bouquet 1 is that it won't work here because there's roses, and it won't work here because there's lilies and roses. And if I try to do that in this world to have peonies and tulips here, then that means bouquet 3 can't have peonies or tulips. Oh, wait a second. I forgot about roses. I think that will work. I almost picked that answer, but if I put peonies, tulips here, yeah, I could still have roses here. So that would work. So the answer is not going to be B. How about C? Lilies, peonies, and roses as the only flowers in bouquet 2. Lilies, peonies, and roses. Well, not here because there's snapdragons, not here because there's tulips, not here because there's snapdragons. Okay, that's the answer. Number 23C. No template will make that work. D says PR and S in bouquet 2.
Not tomorrow.
Which, hold please. PR and S in bouquet 2. PR and S in bouquet 2. That would work in this template, maybe other places as well. P, S, and T in bouquet 3 happened right here. So that will work. So the answer for number 23 is C, and that's the game. It's a super hard game. You know, most like intermediate and below students would never even have gotten to that game because you have to do game 1 and game 2 and game 3 before you ever get there. So, you know, it's not really going to hurt anybody except for like advanced students who are trying to get all 4 games. Don't panic if you're just starting out. That game is a super hard one, but I was able to get to certainty on all of my answers using worlds. I feel pretty good about it. Okay, questions, comments? How can I help? Abigail, Maddie, anything that I've missed in the chat that I should talk about?
So I have a question for
Sure.
22.
For what,
So
23?
22.
22, okay.
So because of the contrapositive of rule 4 of which would be not R, OS, then not L, doesn't that
Wait,
also,
what?
so because of the the contrapositive you can create with rule 4.
Yeah, I think you said it wrong, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So isn't that also another reason why we can't pick A, because then it
Say
would
it
be
again. Say the contrapositive again.
not R, O, or S, then not L.
Okay, so if you don't have R or you do have S, then you
can't
can't have L.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Doesn't that also mean that you can't, that's just another reason why you can't, why A is the right answer.
Sure.
Okay.
Also, I try to never say the word contrapositive anymore. I just don't think it helps you. Like, I know that every LSAT book out there, including my own older LSAT books, always talk about the contrapositive. In my experience, I still learn new things about the way the LSAT works. And I'm now, 14 years into teaching LSAT full time. And I will tell you that I now never, if I can avoid it, I just never even say contrapositive, because it has the perverse effect of actually causing people to confuse sufficient for necessary. The more you think about the contrapositive, the more you actually make the mistake of confusing sufficient for necessary.
Yeah,
And
I've completely stopped using them, but I just
yeah,
now.
I would prefer to use worlds. If I use worlds, then I don't even have to ever consider the contrapositive. By the way, what is the contrapositive? All it is another way of saying the same thing. Contrapositive is nothing more than another way of looking at the exact same rule. All right, thank you, Solomon. Let's move along. I see some questions in the chat, but hopefully Maddie and Abigail will be able to sort those out. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question out loud. We are going to move along to some logical reasoning. I'm going to do this first one about, this looks like a municipal legislator talking about, oh wait, sorry, did I click the wrong thing? Yeah, lighting gift. Okay, sorry, the title confused me. I did do, okay, all right, great, never mind. Ben and I did this question yesterday when we recorded the podcast, so you'll hear this one coming out on episode 305 or whatever of the Thinking LSAT podcast. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to work on this question. The TAs are going to post a survey in Zoom. Please use that survey for two things. One, when you pick an answer, I'll know that you've done the question. Two, tell me which answers are more and less worthy of discussion. As soon as we get to about 2/3 of the people have finished the question, I will do my explanation. Good luck. All right, I'm going to dive on in here. The magic to LSAT logical reasoning is really just to try to call bullshit on people's arguments. This municipal legislator, I have to expect that he or she is completely full of shit. Okay. So I'm going to be looking for ways to call bullshit. And what that means is I'm going to grant them their evidence, but I'm going to argue with any kinds of conclusions that they try to reach from that evidence. So let me show you how it's done. Test 73, section 2, number 11, a municipal legislator says the mayor proposes that the city accept a lighting company's gift of several high-tech streetlights. I think that that's probably just a premise of the argument. The mayor has made this proposal of what? Well, we should accept this lighting company's gift of several high-tech streetlights. I'm not really going to argue with it yet because all it is just here's what the mayor proposes. If the speaker said we should do what the mayor proposes, then I'm going to have to attack. But for now, I'm like, yeah, okay, the mayor proposes that. Fine. What about it? Surely, it says, which is a bad word on the LSAT, surely indicates that they're probably going to try to lie to me. Okay, so I already was on guard and now I'm hyper on guard against what's going to come next. Surely there would be no problem in accepting these streetlights. Oh, dear God. Okay, hold on a second. What do you mean there would be no problem in accepting these streetlights? I'm sure that that is the conclusion of the argument, okay? Or at least a conclusion of the argument, because it sounds like bullshit to me. Why do you think there's no problem accepting this gift? I could think of 1,000 problems of accepting gifts, but let's see what else, let's see what they say here. They say, well, despite some people's fear that the company wants to influence the city's decision regarding park lighting contracts. And I've like immediately go, well, yeah, what about that? That's a good point, potentially. What if that's a problem? What if this gift of high-tech streetlights ends up meaning that we now, for the next 4 decades, have to give all of our lighting contracts to this one company who is going to totally screw us? They haven't provided any evidence in support of their own conclusion that we should accept this gift. All they've done is say, well, some people object to that. All right. So do you have any evidence in support of your actual conclusion? It says the only ulterior motive I can find is the company's desire to have its products seen by mayors who will visit the city for an upcoming convention. Okay, but you could be wrong about that. I mean, that's the only ulterior motive that you can see. But what about the ulterior motive of influencing the city's decision regarding park lighting contracts, which some people are already complaining about? Like your opinion that there's only this other one ulterior motive, that's still not a good reason why we should accept this gift. Do we necessarily think it's a good idea that this lighting company gets to showcase its products for mayors who will visit the city for an upcoming convention? I mean, it's a gift, but how much are these things going to cost to operate? How much are these things going to cost to maintain? Do they actually work? Are they a safety hazard? I could just go on and on and on with potential objections to accepting this gift. And they really haven't provided any evidence yet in support of the idea that we should accept the gift. Last sentence says, in any case, favoritism in city contracts is prevented by our competitive bidding procedure. Fine. I'm willing to grant that as a premise of the argument. Okay, it's a special form of like ritualized combat here where I have to accept their premises while continuing to argue with their conclusion. It's like how in boxing, you're not allowed to punch below the belt, or in UFC, you're not allowed to bite somebody's face off or whatever. Like there's certain things, yeah, you are fighting and yeah, you're trying to beat the shit out of somebody, but there's rules. All right, so the rule in LSAT logical reasoning, I'm trying to beat the shit out of this municipal legislator, make no mistake. But I have to follow the rules, which means I'm going to allow you to present your evidence and I'm going to argue with your conclusion. So the evidence here is, well, we got this competitive bidding procedure. So these people who think, oh, you're going to influence the city's decision regarding park lighting contracts, if we have this competitive bidding procedure and that really does in fact prevent favoritism, then I guess that one line of objections can be disregarded. But that doesn't mean that surely there would be no problem in accepting these, because I could go on literally all day with a litany of different possible problems with accepting, what if these lights attract aliens? I don't know. I was going to say giant mosquitoes. What if these lights attract giant mosquitoes? That would be bad. So I literally could go on all day with just different possible problems with accepting these gifts, but I'm going to grant that, okay, the competitive bidding process probably gets rid of this influence problem. So fine, we can disregard that. Nonetheless, I'm not going to grant you your conclusion that there would be no problem in accepting these gifts. Okay, so I go through all of that. It really takes much longer for me to explain than it would take me to do that in my head. Then I read the question. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the main conclusion of the municipal legislator's argument? And there I just kind of shrug my shoulders and go, oh, okay, so no, this is a simple question. Just what was the conclusion of that argument? Well, it's the thing I've been screaming about for the last 5 minutes. It's, hey, you have not proven your case that there would be no problem in accepting these gifts. So I go into the answer choices looking for, there would be no problem in accepting these gifts. A, some people fear that the company wants to influence the city's decision regarding park lighting contracts is unfounded. Tempting. And I can see by the survey results that about a quarter of you thought that that was a good answer. It's not a terrible answer, at least to the extent that it is a part of the argument. Okay, they definitely did make that point. But the conclusion of the argument was there would be no problem accepting these gifts. A is a premise in support of that conclusion, but it's not actually going as far as the argument went and said there would be no problem accepting these gifts. A is specifically about the objection that some people are making. They went further than that. So A doesn't get all the way to the conclusion of the argument. B says, the mayor's proposal to accept the gift of streetlights should not be considered problematic. And that's the answer. Looks like about 2/3 of you correctly identified that as being the answer to the question. So good job there. If you narrowed it down to A and B, I have a little tip for you. I don't often give tips. This is the LSAT demon. We're not about tips. We're about actually understanding this shit. Okay. But from time to time, I do have a tip, and this might be worth actually writing down. If you narrowed it down to A and B, I have a trick for you. Read A, then loudly say, therefore, then read B. If it makes sense in that order, then B is probably the conclusion. If you're not 100% sure, read B, then loudly say, therefore, and then read A. And if it makes more sense in that order, then A is probably the conclusion. So let me demonstrate. If I read A, then B. A, some people's fear that the company wants to influence the city's decision regarding park lighting contracts is unfounded. Therefore, the mayor's proposal to accept the gift of streetlights should not be considered problematic. Does that make sense in that order? Is that the argument that they were actually making? Well, yeah. A, therefore B makes sense. B is reasonably supported by A. Flip it the other way, read B first, then A. It's not going to make any sense. The mayor's proposal to accept the gift of streetlights should not be considered problematic. Therefore, some people's fear that the company wants to influence the city's decision regarding park lighting contracts is unfounded. What the hell? I know that A and B were both in the argument, but B does not support A. A supports B. Therefore, B is the conclusion, and that's going to be the answer that I end up picking here. C says, it's not appropriate that any company should have the unique opportunity to display its products to mayors attending the upcoming convention, not only is that not the conclusion of the argument, but that actually weakens the argument. It looks like 7% of you thought that that was a good answer. It is not. That is a terrible answer, because not only, yes, I mean, it's just not, it's the opposite of what the argument is trying to claim. D, the city's competitive bidding procedure prevents favoritism in the dispensing of city contracts. About a quarter of you thought that that was a good answer as well. Same thing there. D supports B, not the other way around. Because the city's competitive bidding procedure prevents favoritism in the dispensing of city contracts, therefore, the mayor's proposal should not be considered problematic. It wouldn't make sense if we read it the other way around. So both A and D were parts of the argument, but they were premises in support of B, which is the conclusion. E says the lighting company's desire to display its products to visiting mayors is the real motivation behind the suggested gift of streetlights. What? I guess that was kind of part of that was actually like a speculation of the author, certainly not the main conclusion. Main conclusion was, hey, there's no problem accepting this gift, and that's why the answer is B. Victoria, you've got a hand up.
Hi, yes, Nathan. I just wanted to go back to A. So when I first read A, the word that made me like eliminate it was unfounded, because it says there would be no problem despite some people's fears. So I thought maybe the legislator thinks that, you know, their fears are founded or like were founded, but, you know, now it's okay. Is that like a good way to think about it, or
no? I wouldn't have thought about it that way at all. I mean, synonyms are allowed, okay? And you have to be kind of a little bit generous, at least in, I think it's fair to say that this argument says that these fears are unfounded. I mean, it provides a premise that actually just totally shows how those fears are in fact unfounded. If it's true that favoritism is prevented by our competitive bidding procedure, then that would justify the claim that these fears are unfounded.
right?
I mean, unfounded
Okay, so
doesn't
it is
mean,
true.
yeah, look it up in the dictionary, by the way. Look up unfounded and see what it says, because the LSAT is extremely literal. Doesn't always use the first definition, but there's going to be a definition of unfounded that allows for the possibility of, well, it's still a reasonable thing to be worried about. Some people are worried about this, but if I have reason why they should never be worried about this, then I can call their claim unfounded. Anyway, does that make any sense? Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. So it is true then. So it is true, and it is a premise, but it's just not the conclusion then.
Yeah, I'm fine with A. I can't eliminate A on the grounds that it misstates the argument.
Mm-hmm.
But I can eliminate A on the grounds that it is used as support for B. So therefore, B is the conclusion, not A. This happens a lot on conclusion questions where the wrong answers just kind of rehash all the pieces and parts of the argument. That's really what happened here, is like A was in the argument, D was in the argument, I think E was even in the argument, but they were all kind of used as support for B. The only really terrible answer here was C, because it was just like misstating the argument completely. It was the exact opposite of what the argument said. All right, let's move along to another one. We're going to do this one, speaking staff. Again, please fill out the survey so that I'll know when about 2/3 of you have filled out the survey, then I'll do my explanation. Thanks. Test 73, section 2, question 19. A carved flint object depicting a stylized human head with an open mouth was found in a Stone Age tomb in Ireland. Okay, cool. Some Indiana Jones shit. There's this artifact. It's a little head with an open mouth. What about it? Well, some archaeologists believe that the object was a weapon, the head of a warrior's mace. I stop and think about that. Flint, I think, is like stone, probably pretty heavy stone. So yeah, okay. And the fact that it's an open mouth, I don't know. Who cares what it looks like? I'm going to beat somebody over the head with it. Yeah, sure. That would be a pretty cool mace, I guess. But, says the author, it's too small for that purpose. Oh, tiny little golf ball thing. All right. Well, what am I going to do with that? It's not heavy enough, not big enough. All right. If it's too small for that purpose, then yeah, it probably wasn't a mace. I mean, unless it was a mace for tiny folk, which it probably wasn't. Anyway, because of its size and the fact that an open mouth symbolizes speaking, the object was probably, now here comes the conclusion, okay? I'm granting everything so far. This thing is too small to be a mace. It does have an open mouth. An open mouth does symbolize speaking. But they're going to now make the conclusion that probably this thing was the head of a speaking staff. What's that? Oh, that's a communal object passed around a small assembly to indicate who has the right to speak. And even granting all their evidence, you know, I'm willing to let the mace thing go. It's probably not a mace. It's too small for that. Fine. But that doesn't mean that it has to be the head of a speaking staff, because why can't it be a doll? Why can't it be a golf ball? Why can't it be anything? I mean, why does it have to be a speaking staff? That's so weird. Anyway, which one of the following, if true, would most weaken the argument? On weakened questions, I'm looking for a bad fact for the speaker. So something that would undermine or, you know, make suspect their conclusion. Again, their conclusion was, oh, this was probably a speaking staff, which is a communal object passed around a small assembly to indicate who has the right to speak. I'm looking for something that makes that look questionable. I'm not going to argue with the answer choices here because it said which one of the following, if true, would most weaken the argument. So I have to grant them, I have to grant each answer choice and then consider whether it does something. A, how about if the tomb in which the object was found did not contain any other objects that might have been weapons? What? They're not claiming that this thing is a weapon. I don't see how A would weaken the argument at all. As a matter of fact, if A is true, it might strengthen the argument because some people think this thing is a weapon and A tends to undermine the idea that this thing is a weapon. I don't see how it strengthens, or I don't see how it weakens the idea that this thing is a communal object or a speaking staff or whatever. So A's out. Seems like it could be a strengthener, if anything. B, communal objects were normally passed from one generation to the next in Stone Age Ireland. Tricky. Let me come back to it. C says, the object was carved with an artistry that was rare in Stone Age Ireland. Well, okay, then maybe it was the head of a special communal object indicating who has the right to speak. I would think that the more intricacy is involved, the more likely it is that this was a special, powerful communal symbol. C is not a weakener. D, the tomb in which the object was found was that of a politically prominent person. That to me seems like it clearly strengthens the argument. If this guy's trying to conclude that this was probably the head of a speaking staff, and it turns out that the tomb was, you know, the mayor of the village or whatever, well, then that makes it more likely that this was the head of a speaking staff, not less. E, a speaking staff with a stone head is thought to symbolize a warrior's mace. If anything, I think that also strengthens the argument. Almost half of you thought that that was a good answer, but couldn't that be used in favor of the idea that this was a speaking staff? I mean, listen, I'll make the argument. Some people thought that this thing was a mace originally. It's probably not, though, because it's too small for that purpose. But you know, a speaking staff with a stone head is thought to symbolize a warrior's mace. So I can see how these people might have thought that this was a mace, but it's not. It's the head of a speaking staff. So E, I guess you could probably use E as a weakener, but if I can use it also as a strengthener, it's one of these two-way answers, which just isn't going to be correct. If you put, I just promise you, okay, if you're trying to attack this argument and you put E into your brief, if I'm on the other side, I'm going to be all over E, like, oh, thank you for bringing that up. It's so great that you decided to put that in your brief, because now I'm going to use that as evidence against you. I read E as a strengthener. We're looking for a weakener. Coming back to B, communal objects were normally passed from one generation to the next in Stone Age Ireland. This thing was found buried in a tomb. It's a fact that this thing was found buried in a tomb. If communal objects were normally passed from one generation to the next, then why was this thing found buried in a tomb? Now, I'm not saying that B completely devastates the argument, but A, C, D, and E are all either irrelevant or strengthen the argument. I have to pick an answer here that at least conceivably would be used as a weakener. And I can certainly see how B would only ever be used as a weakener in exactly that way, which is, hey, you're trying to claim that this thing is a communal object. If it's a fact that communal objects are normally passed from one generation to the next, then how the hell did this thing, it didn't get passed from one generation to the next. They buried it in the ground. Because this thing was found buried in the ground, B is a really bad fact for somebody who's trying to conclude that it was a any communal object, including the head of a speaking staff. That's why the answer here is B. Nicholas, sure. I do think, I mean, I always read all 5 on logical reasoning. I don't necessarily do that on logic games always, but I do always read all 5 on LR and RC both. And I get it. If you didn't feel like B was a super powerful weakener at first, that's fine. But you can't pick any of those other answers, especially the ones that could be used as strengtheners. You're going to be shooting yourself in the foot if that's what you put into your argument. So, you know, returning back to B, one thing to keep in mind is that the test has to make perfect sense in the minds of the test makers. Ben always gets mad at me when I say that, and he says, no, the test makes perfect sense, which I will grant him, but I think it's a useful thing to consider that whoever wrote this question intended there to be one clear answer, okay? And A, C, D, and E are not clear. They're either irrelevant or they could be used both ways, or they could only be used as strengtheners. And none of those answers, you can't comfortably pick any of those answers. But returning back to B, you know, when you think it through the way I explained it, hopefully you get to that click where you go, oh, I see. You said this thing was found buried in the ground. You're trying to claim that it's a communal object. If communal objects are normally passed from one generation to the next, then how the hell is this thing a communal object? I see what you meant. I get it. And you feel that click, and then you know you found the right answer. Okay, one more LR, and then we'll move on to RC. We're going to do this one about the Sockeye salmon. Good luck. Test 73, section 2, number 22 says, because the native salmon in Lake Clearwater had nearly disappeared, sockeye salmon were introduced in 1940. Oh boy, what could possibly go wrong? After being introduced, this genetically uniform group of sockeyes split into two distinct populations that do not interbreed, one inhabiting deep areas of the lake and the other inhabiting shallow areas. All right, didn't really go the direction I was expecting. You know, I thought it was gonna be like, well, this non-native species end up causing all kinds of problems. But that's not where they're going. Where they are going is, hey, the introduced species split into two species that now don't interbreed. One of them is in the deep water and one of them is in the shallow water. So what about it? Since the two populations now differ genetically, some researchers hypothesize that each has adapted genetically to its distinct habitat. And it is true that one of them lives in the deep water and one of them lives in the shallow water. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm willing to grant that they could have adapted genetically, although notice I'm willing to grant that they could have adapted genetically. I'm also willing to think about reasons why maybe they couldn't have adapted genetically. And the first thing that I think about is evolution normally takes place on very long time frames. I mean, that's just fact. So, you know, I mean, unless we're talking about viruses, which adapt quicker. But my first objection here is, wait a second, this thing was only introduced in the lake in 1940. And are you really telling me that they adapted genetically to the shallow water and the deep water since 1940? That seems like a pretty fast genetic adaptation. Is it even possible that they could have adapted genetically that quickly? Anyway, which one of the following, if true, most strongly supports the researcher's hypothesis? So it's a strengthened question. I'm looking for something that helps their hypothesis that these two have adapted genetically to their habitat. Sometimes on strengthened questions, the correct answer is going to be something that defends the argument against attack. So that's possible here. Maybe my objection was that's not enough time for a genetic adaptation. If I'm going to strengthen the argument, the opposite of that would be a good strengthener. In the time since 1940 to now, these fish have had plenty of time to adapt genetically. That doesn't prove that they did adapt genetically, but it defends that hypothesis against a possible problem. So that could be a good answer for this type of question. Let's see what we got in the answer choices. A says, neither of the two populations of sockeyes has interbred with the native salmon. Ooh, I didn't think about that possible objection. But now that you mention it, what if the deep water salmon are getting it on with the native salmon? It didn't say that they had disappeared. What if there were 3 super randy native salmon left in the lake and they were at the very bottom of the lake? And what if the sockeye salmon that were introduced, what if the ones that went to the deep water found those 3 super randy native salmon and interbred with them? If that's the case, then that's not an adaptation to the environment of deep water. That's a different way that these two populations of salmon might have split off from one another. So even though I didn't predict, hey, what if they interbred, I can certainly see how A eliminates a possible problem with their argument. And I bet you that the answer is going to turn out to be A. B, when the native salmon in Lake Clearwater were numerous, they comprised 2 distinct populations that did not interbreed. So what does that have to do with genetic adaptation to shallow water versus deep water? I just like the fact that the native salmon also separated into two populations doesn't mean that they adapted genetically to their different habitats. I mean, B doesn't even say that those two populations lived in different habitats. Those two populations could have lived in the exact same habitat. So B's just, you'd have to add a lot to B, I think, in order to make it make any sense. It looks like, you know, this was by far the second most commonly chosen answer. But to me, it just doesn't do enough to strengthen this argument. I like A a lot better. I see a clear problem with the argument that A seems like it defends against, whereas B is like, well, yeah, I mean, I already know that the native salmon are in two different populations that don't interbreed. The fact that the native salmon did the same thing, so what? I just don't see how that possibly supports the idea that the reason why they separated is because of a genetic adaptation to different habitats. B doesn't say anything about the habitats. B doesn't eliminate any possible problems with the argument like A does. B doesn't seem useful to me. C, most types of salmon that inhabit lakes spend part of the time in shallow water and part in deep water. Who cares? I know that these salmon do that. Sorry, no, these salmon don't do that. These salmon go to, some of them are in the deep and some of them are in the shallow. So C says normally they don't do that. So like what? How does that strengthen the argument? D, one of the populations of sockeyes is virtually identical genetically to the sockeyes originally introduced in 1940 and the other one split off. Who cares? That could be because they interbred with the native salmon. It doesn't have to be a genetic adaptation to the environment. You know, the conclusion of this argument was about the why of why these two are not interbreeding anymore. And D has nothing to do with the why. E, the total number of sockeye salmon in the lake is not as large as the number of native salmon had been many years ago. That's the worst answer. None of you even thought that that was good at all, which I'm happy to hear. Just seems irrelevant. A here is going to turn out to be the correct answer. Again, it's a defensive strengthener. A does not prove the conclusion at all. But if you consider what happens when A is false, if A is false, it calls the conclusion of the argument into question. That's why making A true strengthens the argument by defending it against a potential attack. Hope that helps. All right. Let's move along to reading comprehension. I really like to teach reading comprehension by demonstration. So I am going to read you this passage, but first I'm going to give you 4 or 5 minutes to read the passage on your own. Then you can compare your reading of the passage to my reading of the passage. And I think you'll find that the big difference in reading comp is that I get a hell of a lot more out of the passage than most novices or even intermediate students tend to get out of it, okay? So read it carefully, especially at the top, by the way. The first couple sentences are gonna try to confuse you. They're gonna try to see if they'll put you to sleep. They're doing this on purpose, y'all. So you have to like just resist that, oh my God, I don't wanna hear about this. This is a boring topic, or this is a really hard sentence. I don't care. This is nothing compared to the shit that you're gonna have to read in law school. So we've got to fight through that, and we've got to make sure that we're making sense of it as we go. Then the bottom of the passage should be a little bit easier to digest if you really chewed on the top. All right, I'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes to read the passage. Have fun. All right, let me read to you and you can compare your attack with my attack. There's a poll open now for you to tell me which of these questions you would like me to go over. Probably not going to have time to go over all of them. We will have full written explanations of every single one of these questions in the Demon. So I don't have to necessarily do a video explanation of all of them. Thank you. I can see some of you filling out the survey already, but let me go ahead and read you the passage. Test 73, passage 2, story time. It says, from a critical discussion of the work of Victorian photographer Julia Margaret Cameron. Okay, so we're gonna hear criticism, which normally means like academic, boring criticism of this photographer, Julia Margaret Cameron. All right, can't wait to hear, that was sarcastic. Anyway, what Cameron called her fancy subject pictures. What are those? Well, those are photographs in which 2 or more costumed sitters enacted under Cameron's direction scenes from the Bible, mythology, Shakespeare, or Tennyson, bear unmistakable traces of the often comical conditions under which they were taken. I like comedy. Okay, so I'm hoping to hear about funny stories. You know, this does seem kind of funny, like you got people dressed up as Jesus or Romeo and Juliet or whatever, and they're sitting there for a photograph. And according to the first sentence of this passage, they're funny. The conditions were funny, and you can tell that it was funny from looking at the picture. So why was it so funny? In many respects, they have more connection to the family album pictures of recalcitrant relatives who have been herded together for the obligatory group picture than they do to the masterpieces of Western painting. And I guess my reaction to that is no shit. I mean, you have people sitting there dressed up in funny costumes. I can definitely see them rolling their eyes, you know, like when you drag your dad or your brother over to get the group picture and everybody's flipping off the camera and just, you know, being obnoxious. That certainly seems like what would happen here. Rather, you know, how could this be a masterpiece? It sounds goofy as hell right from the beginning. But is the author really going to end up on that position? Because why is the author talking about these? If these are just goofy and not masterpieces, then why are we even talking about it? So I'm expecting kind of a shift in perspective here at some point. In third sentence, in Raphael and Giotto, there are no infant Christs whose faces are blurred because they moved, or who are looking at the viewer with frank hatred. Okay, so Raphael and Giotto there are meant to be examples of the masterpieces of Western painting, contrasted with the infant Christ, who actually in Cameron's pictures was just the family baby, and the family baby is either moving around frantically so you can't even get a clear picture of the face of the angelic baby Jesus, you know, or just the scowl of like, why are you making me do this? And so you see a baby Jesus that's just like clearly hating the whole thing. And I can see how, yeah, okay, that seems kind of funny and not kind of masterpiece-y, more like a family photo. Got it. These traces, of course, are what give the photographs their life and charm. And now, you know, the author previously said that they are funny, but now the author actually says that they are alive and they are charming. And so that's a little bit more editorialization. The author's kind of tipping her hand that, hey, you know, I actually like these things. These are interesting to look at. They're lively, they're charming, they're funny. If Cameron had succeeded in her project of making seamless works of illustrative art, her work would be among the curiosities of Victorian photography, like Oscar Gustav Rylander's extravagantly awful, that's a pretty bad insult, extravagantly awful, The Two Ways of Life. rather than among its most vital images, which the author claims these photographs are. So the author is saying, yeah, they're goofy. Yeah, the face of the baby Jesus is blurred. But if the author would have succeeded, or sorry, the photographer would have succeeded in her intention of making these things perfect, they actually would have been worse, because it's exactly the fact that the baby's moving or scowling at the camera. That's what makes these photographs so cool, according to the author. Second paragraph, it is precisely the camera's realism, defined here as its stubborn obsession with the surface of things, that has given Cameron's theatricality and artificiality its atmosphere of truth. All right, so again, remember what she's doing here. She's dressing people up as Hamlet or whatever, and then, but they're not, they're your dad, and then taking a picture. And so, yeah, it couldn't be more theatrical and artificial to have your dad dressed up as Hamlet, but the camera capturing your dad's pissed off expression is what gives these things this atmosphere of truth. It's the truth of the sitting rather than the fiction which all the dressing up was in aid of that wafts out of these wonderful and strange, not quite in focus photographs. All right, so I'm getting it. You know, it's like the thing that's funny to look at is, oh my God, look at all these people that had to sit for this stupid photograph, and look at what they actually did. Like, look how they fucked it up by moving around or making weird faces or whatever. That's what the author thinks is so cool. They are what they are. Pictures of housemaids and nieces and husbands and village children who are dressed up as Mary Madonnas and infant Jesuses and John the Baptists and Lancelots and Guinevere's, and trying desperately hard to sit still. Sounds miserable. I would never have wanted to do it, but yeah, I can see how I could get a laugh out of the photographs. The way each sitter endures his or her ordeal is the collective action of the photograph, its plot, so to speak. Oh, so I can actually see it being pretty interesting to compare the different people. Some people might be really into it, and then other people are really agitated. When we look at a narrative painting, we can suspend our disbelief. When we look at a narrative photograph, we cannot. I guess because the painting is so perfect and a photograph is never going to be perfect. We are always aware of the photograph's doubleness, of each figure's imaginary and real personas. Oh, because it is a real person, not Guinevere. I get it. Theater can transcend its doubleness, make us believe for at least some of the time that we are seeing only Lear or Medea. Still, photographs of theatrical scenes can never escape being pictures of actors. If you say so. I mean, I could argue with that, but that's the author's opinion, that in theater, yeah, you might believe that it's Romeo for a second, but a picture like these ones that Julia Margaret Cameron made, you're always going to be able to see that, nah, it's an actor playing Romeo. What gives Cameron's pictures of actors their special quality, that is their status as treasures of photography of an unfathomably peculiar sort, which is, boy, unfathomably peculiar. That seems extra. What? You dressed up people and took a picture. I don't know why that's unfathomably peculiar, but the author thinks these things are real weird. Is there singular combination of amateurism and artistry? So the author really likes that these are just your family or kids from the village or whatever. But then there's an artistry, I guess, to the way they're posed or the way they're shot. In The Passing of Arthur, for example, the mast and oar of the makeshift boat representing a royal barge are obviously broomsticks, and the water is white muslin drapery. But these details are insignificant. For once, the homely truth of the sitting gives right of place to the romantic fantasy of its director. What? What do you mean? You got to say more about that. I have no idea what you're talking about. The picture, a night scene, is magical and mysterious, while Cameron's fancy subject pictures have been compared to poor amateur theatricals. The passing of Arthur puts one in the mind of good amateur theatricals one has seen and recalls with shameless delight. All right. This passage to me ends with kind of a whimper. I was pretty much enjoying the argument. And then in the very last paragraph, it just kind of went in, I don't know, I'm not sure I really believe it or whatever, but it's like, hey, there's this photograph, the passing of Arthur, that the author thinks is especially cool. And yeah, you can see how fake it is because of the broomsticks. But it's still really neat because it evokes whatever amateur plays you've seen in the past. I don't look back fondly on whatever dumb high school plays I saw, but okay, if you say so. It evokes good amateur theatricals I have seen. I'm not sure I've seen any good amateur theatricals, but the author apparently has. Main point of the passage is pretty much 2 thumbs up on the work of Victorian photographer Julia Margaret Cameron. The author says what makes them cool is not how perfect they are. It's exactly the opposite of that. What makes them cool is how imperfect they are. They are clearly amateurish, but you get this dual aspect of them where you see the posing and the fake sets and all that stuff, but then you also see the real people enduring the process of sitting for this photograph, and the author thinks that's neat. So that's what I got. I see some of you saying, hey, I gotta go. That's totally cool. One thing that's awesome about studying for the LSAT online these days is that you can always show up late. You can always leave early. It's never a distraction in the slightest. I just don't care. If you want to say goodbye, you can say goodbye. But you know, I'll be back tonight actually for 4 hours worth of classes tonight. And hopefully I'll see you guys there. It's one really wonderful thing about studying LSAT online is that we no longer have to waste time with being at a certain place at a certain time. You can seamlessly, alt tab from work right over to class, and it takes you 2 seconds, and it's just a much more efficient way to study for the LSAT. So if you've got to go do other shit in your life, you could take a break in the middle of class. I don't care. Turn off your camera, go do whatever you got to do, and come back. All right. Let's answer some of these questions. I see that, yeah, a little over half of you have filled out the survey. Thank you very much for that. I like to always answer the main point question. So I'll start with number 8. Test 73, passage 2, question number 8. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage? I'm always going to stop here and predict something. I've got to arm myself. If I was going to tell my mom what this passage is about, I would say something like, well, there's this Victorian photographer. She made these kind of weird, silly photographs where she dressed people up. And they're really cool because the why has to be in the answer, I think. They're really cool because of this dual nature of you can see what the author was the photographer was intending to do, and then you can see the actual subjects enduring, like the crying baby, enduring the sitting. And that's what the author thinks is really cool. So that's what I'm looking for as I go into these answers. A, the circumstances under which Cameron's fancy subject pictures were taken to render them unintentionally comical. I'm not sure what that even means. They were taken, the circumstances under which the pictures were taken. Oh, sorry, render them unintentionally comical. I get it. That is definitely part of the passage. But I don't think that that's the main point of the passage, because you can be unintentionally comical and also terrible at the same time. This author does not think that they're terrible. This author thinks that they're great. And simply saying that they're unintentionally comical doesn't get the point across that, no, these things are really cool. think of your least favorite politician. They are probably unintentionally comical. That doesn't mean that you think they're good. B, the peculiar charm of Cameron's fancy subject pictures derives from the viewer's simultaneously awareness of the fictional scene portrayed and the circumstances of its portrayal. I love that argument a lot. Or, sorry, I love that answer a lot. Now, that's not the words that I would have chosen, but it means the same damn thing. I was telling my mom, hey, these are cool because you see the intended scene, but you also see the actual scene. And that's what's neat about it. And that's what B says in entirely different language, but the answer is going to be B, I bet. C, the implicit claim of Cameron's fancy subject pictures to comparison with the masterpieces of Western painting is undermined by the obtrusiveness of the sitters. The author would definitely disagree with that. The author thinks that these things are cool precisely because of the obtrusiveness of the sitters, not that the obtrusiveness of the sitters ruins the photograph. D, the most successful of Cameron's fancy subject pictures from an aesthetic point of view are those in which the viewer is completely unaware that the sitters are engaged in role playing. Absolutely not. In exact opposite. Both C and D are just exactly the opposite of what the author believes. E, the interest of Cameron's fancy subject pictures consists in what they tell us about the sitters and not in the imaginary scenes they portray. I don't think so. I think the author likes both aspects. The author likes what was intended to be portrayed and what is accidentally portrayed.